Welcome to Jelly Trumpet!
So this is the bonus track with Roxana Gramada, copywriter, conversion copywriter based in Romania. So we've done our 12 questions in 12 minutes. We've done very well. Mr. B is going to be very pleased with me. And I like to please Mr. B because he's a nice chap. So there was a couple of things that you said in there about when you first start a project, looking at patterns. And you also have a structure. What sort of patterns are you looking for? And a follow-up question would be, does that structure ever change?
So it's a great question. It's the kind of question that people who deal with data would ask, you know? So when I start a project, let's say that somebody hires me to do their positioning. They're like, what's going to be my key message? Let's say that they're this company, they've been doing rather well, but now they want to considerably up their rates, up their profile. They need to come up with better messaging. The product has improved. What do you do? So it can be a company and like a tech company from Eastern Europe, but it can also be a company of one. Somebody who's built their own practice, they've kind of rehearsed, they went through all the moves, and now they're like, so I need to grow now. What's the next step for me? So I always do this 90-minute induction, and I will always start with the usual suspects. You know, I've seen induction questionnaires from other marketers around the world, and we pretty much all end up asking sort of the same thing. And I've had clients say, oh, only these questions alone help me structure my stuff, blah, blah, blah. And it's always good. But, you know, that's just the starting part. That's where you get them to brain dump stuff. And that's the pretext for you to start untangling something. There will always be in those answers and in the proper conversation, because then you take the answers that they come up with, you review them and you pick at them, just like you're picking at my answers, you know, like, this is interesting. What's this like? Say more about that, you know, stuff like that. And they will say something that ultimately will be revealing about their ambitions, about their goals, about the obstacles and how they react to that. Ultimately, you want to go, it's a company of one, I always go at what pisses them off. And how they go about it. And it's not like I'm looking for something in particular, but to go back to my hero, Werner Erhard, he basically told me, because I met my hero, oh my God, and we were at this conference in London, and he said to me, you have to create out here. It's you and me and nobody else in the world. And as you do, you ask yourself the ultimate question. What is that which I am interacting with? Okay, what's coming at you? For instance, I had a call with this lady the other day. She's a transformational coach somewhere in England. And you have to ask yourself, what are you present with as you talk to her? And she was, you know how people show up at calls and basically you either see a generic holiday, background, or you see people coming up with the usual IKEA shelves or stuff like that. And I promise you, this lady had behind her a very particular kind of landscape, which tells me that she doesn't make the obvious choices. She's a curator, which tells me that she put energy into layering and structuring and, picking those things. So she's a world builder. What else does she do? So the person you're talking to will show who they are right there in that instance of talking to you. And you just have to be aware of what they're doing, observe, and take the clues. That's why I always say...
It is sort of like detective work that you're doing. There.
It is.
You've got a structure that you use, and you're also using your intuition to find those moments, those key emotions.
Absolutely.
To differentiate the person.
Absolutely. And if you calm your system down and you just focus on them, you listen to the clues. They will scream at you. All you have to do is ask, and something will be revealed. And I promise you, this is not standard copywriting procedure. That's probably what sets me apart and others, because I don't think I'm the only one on this planet doing it. But that's how it's done. That's how I do it. That's how I reveal the truth.
Interesting, very interesting. I want to go back. I want to go over something else to do with conversion.
Sure.
So for me, when I do very little conversion writing. I do a bit of it. As I'm always looking for the question, which is at the visitor to a website, is what's in it for me, and try to address that. But I also go a stage further and wondered if you did the same for their business building persona marketing. Do you go down that route of creating persona for their businesses?
I always want to know who the client is, and I want to make sure I get to know them as intimately as I can. And if you ask me what the obstacle is, that's always the number one objection I get from my clients is always going to be, do you really need to talk to clients? Yes, I do. Mm-hmm. Yes, I do. Because that's where I get what they actually get from you, that why they come to work with you, why they go for you and not somebody else, so on and so forth. So I will go after persona information. I will go about it in the Job to Be Done, Clayton Christensen kind of, strategy school. But I will do the best in my power to limit the persona to one.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. That's very
interesting. And I know, because you know what? It's always going to be tempting to say, oh, I have more. And of course, we're talking about a specific kind of client here, but you have to stay true to the thing that says one reader, one promise. Otherwise, you're just diluting, Well,
that's a very interesting approach to it. But is that the case for all your clients? You've just come up with the one persona?
No, listen, this is where the agony is going to be, because they're going to have a hard time letting go. And you have to have compassion for them, because especially if they've just started out, they're either fresh off the boat or a few years in, unless they're very decided and very determined. And those are the ones that you really see, skyrocket. They're going to work through their own issues as they let go of some client and crystallize a better idea of who they're talking to, or they need to test stuff and see what works, because they're really, this is a work in process kind of business that they have. But I always make sure that they get it. They really get it. That for this to work, there's going to be one. In the end, there can be only one.
Sounds like Holland to me.
Yeah, but you know what? They don't have resources for more. They just don't.
No, that's true, and you can lose focus. But it does remind me of a disc jockey, very famous disc jockey who passed away a few years ago, called Terry Wogan in this country, and he had the biggest audience in the UK. But he always addressed his audience as the audience, as one person, the listener. He used to say, and I often wondered why he did that, because he could personalise, and he was talking down a microphone, not to this tens and hundreds of thousands of people. He was just talking like a friend, and that focus was very friendly and very emotional, and he was very much loved. So it's essentially what you're doing there, is focusing on that one thing. Now, because we're both in the digital space, and I toy with copywriting, you do it for a living. How do your clients assess the success of your work? Do they look for a return on investment? Do they measure it in some way?
Yes, ideally everything will translate into money. It's going to be some form of return on investment. So if I give them sales copy that they launch with, obviously we're going to look at how much money they put in and how much they took out. If I do emails for them, because sometimes I also do that, we're looking at what happened. How many leads would you have normally with this kind of email, and how much have I, where have I taken you? Have I taken you from A to B? What's the progress there? And hence the 15% on a Friday afternoon. in my bio, because essentially we had this tech company that was launching a premium package, and they sent a campaign on a Friday afternoon, and they converted at 15% on a Friday afternoon, which was pretty cool. Pretty cool. Yeah. So yes, but when you do somebody's key message, you're not going to be able to immediately monetize it. You're not going to say, and I just worked with Roxana and she came up with my main sentence and I immediately blah, blah, blah. No, because that's going to take some work. You're going to give them time. First of all, do they feel as humans that they have a sentence that rings true to their work? Does that sentence work when they work with clients? What's the kind of feedback they say? Do they feel that they're in possession of essential equipment as they walk around the world, spreading their brilliance, or whatever it is that they call it, where they work with people? Do they feel that they are concise and smooth and strong in what they have to offer the world? Does it ring true for them? And ultimately, is it working? Do you engage in the kind of conversation that people say, oh yeah, I get what you're doing. Yeah, this is fine, completely. It's for me, or it's not for me, or I know somebody who might just, be able to blah, blah, blah. So you kind of have to look for those things too. And then this incredible thing happens when your key message is concise, is focused, is the right one. When you stand in your core in woo-woo speak, then what happens is that you have a brand that you can actually drive. All of a sudden, the offerings make sense. You can talk about it. It's easy to come up with a content plan, so on and so forth, because the DNA is there. It's all in the right spot. So you don't have to twist your mind into a pretzel and your mind trip all over the place so that you can come up with an idea for a post. No, it's there because you're in possession of your key messaging. You know what you are and for whom. You know what that person's life look like. You know how you enter their life, how you change it, what it looks like before and after, so on and so forth. When you have that, go at it. You're done, basically, conception-wise.
I'd now like to
iterate.
Pick up on something that you wrote that I was so intrigued by, that I posted on LinkedIn about this phrase, and I'm just going to ask you this. So the phrase is boudoir mantra, which I loved, I adored, so I had to write something about it. I just adored something about it. Did that phrase just fall into your lap, or did you generate that when you're writing copy? Do you let it come to you because you're experienced and you've done your research and it all comes to you, or do you work to a plan and that is that structure, or do these phrases just come out thin air?
I mean, again, to the best of my self-awareness, this is my answer. I am the kind of writer that will watch YouTube videos and then read whatever, and then blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, this rant will come off me, or out of me. I will just sit down and write posts for 2 months. Okay? That's how Boudoir Mantra happened. It just basically came to me. Okay? Because there was enough tension in me that I could create that. And I say that in the best kind of way. The process was in place. To go back to our previous question, I was writing to one person, for one person. I had that person in mind. And, just to give it an example, the person is my cousin, for instance. He will peek at everything I say. He will sometimes call and say, if I hear brain spa if I read brain spa in your posts one more time, I'm going to go, oh. He will fine. He's very hard to please, is what I mean. That day I posted the Boudoir Mantra. He called and said, so what's a Boudoir Mantra? And I knew that if I had his attention, things would happen. And that's where you came up and said, oh, I love Boudoir Mantra, because obviously you're the kind of writer that would and reader that would appreciate that. So you want to be in a place where you feed, you clean, and you fuel your instrument.
Mm-hmm.
You clean it every day because you clean your perception and you call yourself at it when you're a jerk. And you work the instrument to the best of your abilities daily. I don't do it daily, but I have this calendar that says the Seinfeld Factor calendar. And every day I have a writing practice, I cross an X. And every time I don't, it just shows an empty box. You clean and you work your instrument. And then you pray for the best is what you do.
How much of this, because I was also intrigued by your love of puzzles, how much is puzzles cleaning your instrument while your unconscious is processing stuff that you've learned? So is that why puzzles are important to you, or is it just, I like puzzles?
Oh, I'm going to say two things about puzzles. I'm Googling my mind. What do I have about puzzles? I got two things. The number one is, a while ago, I was listening to this lovely podcast by Alec Baldwin. It's called Here's the Thing. And Stephen Daldry, the director, was invited. And at the time, I don't think Stephen Daldry had done much, but he had definitely done a wonderful movie called, it's about this little boy who wants to be a dancer. What's it called? Timmy Elliott or something like that. Well,
Billy Elliot.
Billy Elliot. A wonderful movie from the 90s, I think. And I was like, oh, I love Stephen Daldry. What's Stephen Daldry going to say? And Stephen Daldry said, well, listen, if you like puzzles, you're going to like being a film director or editor, because it's all about putting together the puzzles. And I was like, oh, wait a second. And at the time, I was working on a personal project. I had done a film documentary about my Aikido friends. So I was like, oh, okay. And I tried it and I loved it. Both the documentary and working on the documentary and the puzzles. But the puzzles, 2,000 Bruegel pieces, I'm talking about the fall of the revolt of, what's it called? The Revolt of the Fallen Angels or something like that by Bruegel, whom I absolutely adore. But that's a different story. And second thing about puzzles is I think it's the best we can around. We can attempt at building like, mandala. Mm-hmm. You just work at it, you complete it, and then you completely unravel it. And off it goes into space. And I read into this book by, what's his name? I think it's John Richardson. I don't remember the name exactly. It's a Jungian therapist / author. He has these wonderful, very short books about he, she, the mindset of the archetype, the masculine archetype, the feminine archetype, so on and so forth. And he has one about the shadow. And he says, your best way to eat your own shadow is to build mandalas. And I say, the best way you can attempt a mandala as a modern living person is to do a puzzle there.
I think I find that fascinating. I also find it fascinating. I've got a project in my mind which is about people's shadows leaving them. And so they have to go and find their shadows. So that's intriguing. Now, we're going to wrap up, and I'm in two minds because I've got two questions I want to ask you, but I think I'm going to go the easy route because it fascinates me. You said during our 12 minutes and 12 questions that if it was 175 years ago, you'd be a housewife. Could you explain that to me? Because it's not becoming words to me that you would be anything like that.
Oh, come on. What do you think I could have done 100 years ago? What were women doing 100 years ago? Mm-hmm. What was their way of expression? Mm-hmm. The best thing, they were like born into a family. They were married off as quickly as possible because they were like, one less mouth to feed. And what was their sole channel of expression? What is the place where they were like, yeah, this is my thing and I'm going to ace it? Mm-hmm. Mother effers running a home. That's all they had. So I would have made a brilliant housewife. I promise you.
I'm sure. I'm absolutely.
Cakes and all.
Now, there's other stuff I'd like to pick up on, but I think we've run through some very interesting topics, and I've learned a great deal from you, and I'm very pleased with that. So perhaps I'll invite you again for season 3, and we can pick up on Jerry Seinfeld, because that interests me as well. So for now, Roxana Gramada, conversion copywriter from Becoming Words, I'd like to thank you very much for being on Jelly Trumpet.
Thank you. And thank Mr. B.